The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in my apartment as I sat frozen, staring at the email that had just landed in my inbox. Save the date. Annual Sinclair family reunion at Willow Lake Lodge. My name wasn't mentioned once. Not in the cheerful subject line, not in the list of confirmed attendees, not even as an afterthought tucked in the body of the message. Just Jason, Megan, their spouses, their kids, a new generation of Sinclair pride paraded out like trophies while I remained invisible, exactly as I had been for the past 10 years. A sharp gust rattled the windows behind me, carrying the chill of the autumn evening into the room. I wrapped my arms around myself, not from the cold, but from the hollow ache settling deep inside my chest. I knew better than to expect anything different. I told myself I was prepared this time, and yet here I was sitting alone in my penthouse apartment, feeling like a 12-year-old girl left behind at the dinner table once again. The phone on the coffee table buzzed. Without even looking, I knew it would be her. Mom, Eleanor Sinclair, right on cue. I hesitated only for a second before answering. Hi, Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. Harper, sweetheart, she cooed, and the falseness in her tone made my stomach churn. About the reunion, you know how it is, dear. Jason's boys are growing so fast, and Megan's bringing her new fiancé. We're a little tight on space this year. I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me like so much background noise. I'd heard it all before. Of course, I said lightly. Wouldn't want to overcrowd things. There was a beat of silence, and I almost thought she might say something different this time, but she didn't. We'll miss you, she added finally, in a voice that made it clear she wouldn't. I hung up without another word. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the silence of my apartment. No angry shouting, no crying, no pleading for inclusion. Just silence, cold, final, and oddly liberating. I pushed back from the table and stood, my reflection caught faintly in the window. A successful woman in a sharp navy suit, standing alone against the glittering skyline of the city. A woman who had clawed her way to the top, despite every whispered slight, every pointed exclusion, every invisible scar. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Piper. Let me guess, it read, the annual you're not invited call? I smiled grimly and texted back, right on schedule. You know what this means, Piper replied instantly. Time to stop letting them rent space in your head for free. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. She was right. This wasn't just another year of being forgotten. This was a turning point, a moment to decide if I would continue being the outcast they tolerated, or if I would finally reclaim the parts of myself they had stolen piece by piece over the years. I sat back down, fingers hovering over the keyboard, not to respond to their email, but to open the real estate website I'd bookmarked months ago. Willow Lake Lodge, the place that held every childhood memory, both sweet and bitter, was on the market, and it was vulnerable, just like they'd always assumed I would be. Not anymore. My heartbeat roared in my ears as I clicked the listing, staring at the photos of peeling paint, sagging porches, and cracked windows. To them, it was still a shrine to family legacy. To me, it was something different now. It was an opportunity. The cursor hovered over the contact agent button. I didn't flinch. I didn't second guess. I clicked, and somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. For the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't the forgotten Sinclair daughter anymore. I was the one setting the terms now. The next morning, the city woke up in a blur of honking horns and rushing footsteps. But I sat at my kitchen counter, a cup of untouched coffee cooling between my hands. I stared at the real estate agent's reply blinking on my phone screen. Available for immediate private viewing. Sellers motivated. Cash offers prioritized. Cash wasn't a problem, not anymore. The memory of Mom's voice from last night echoed in my mind, sweetly shutting the door on me once again. My fingers clenched around the mug. They had always expected me to fade away quietly, to accept being the forgotten daughter, the necessary inconvenience they never quite knew what to do with. Not this time. Morning, warrior, Piper chirped from my phone as her face filled the screen in a video call. I smiled faintly. Morning. You were right. I usually am, she winked. So, what's the plan, Miss Sinclair? I hesitated for a moment before answering. I'm buying the lodge. Piper's mouth dropped open. You're serious? Dead serious, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Not to throw it in their faces. Not exactly. I paused, searching for the right words. I need to take back something they stole from me. Piper's eyes softened. Your childhood. I nodded slowly. Harper, she said gently, this is going to change everything. I know, I whispered, and for once, the thought didn't terrify me, it thrilled me. Later that day, after signing a confidentiality agreement with a realtor, I toured Willow Lake Lodge under the cover of anonymity. The place was worse than I remembered. The front porch sagged dangerously under my weight, the paint peeled like shedding skin, and the familiar scent of lake water and old would hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood alone in the grand, crumbling dining room where family dinners once buzzed with laughter. Laughter I was rarely part of. I traced my fingers across the battered oak table, seeing shadows of a girl who had learned too early that silence was safer than disappointment. No more. This place has good bones. The realtor chirped nervously, mistaking my silence for hesitation. With a little love, it could be a gem again. I smiled thinly. It's not the house that needs fixing, I murmured. We finalized the paperwork in record time. Cash. No contingencies. No haggling. Just like that, the lodge, and every memory it held, belonged to me. Driving back into the city, as twilight bled across the sky, I called Andrew Monroe. My mentor. My anchor. Good news, I said as he picked up. Let me guess, he chuckled. You finally decided to take the promotion? Not yet, I teased. But I did make a rather interesting purchase. As I explained, he laughed. A deep, proud sound that warmed me more than any hollow words from my family ever had. You know, he said thoughtfully, there's an old saying. Success isn't revenge. It's proof you were never the problem. I smiled, watching the city lights flicker on one by one below me. And Harper, he added, his tone serious now, whatever happens next, make sure you're doing it for you. Not them. I am, I said softly. And for the first time, I meant it. That night, long after the city fell asleep, I sat at my desk drafting plans, renovation budgets, event schedules, staffing contracts. The lodge wouldn't just be a family relic anymore. It would be a thriving lakeside retreat, a symbol of everything they had failed to recognize in me. By the time the first rays of dawn pierced the skyline, my plan was no longer just an idea. It was a blueprint for something bigger, stronger, and completely mine. They had written me off a long time ago. They thought they had closed the chapter on me forever. But some stories don't end just because someone else puts down the pen. Sometimes the girl they left behind grows up and writes a new ending. The weeks that followed blurred into a relentless rhythm of meetings, phone calls, and blueprints. By day, I sat in high-rise boardrooms, commanding respect from men twice my age as we negotiated the Richardson merger, the biggest deal our firm had ever touched. By night, I pored over renovation plans for the lodge, working with architects and contractors to transform the crumbling old house into something vibrant, something alive. Success, I realized, wasn't loud. It was quiet, relentless, inevitable. Andrew pushed me harder than ever, preparing me for the transition to London. This is it, Harper, he said during one late-night strategy session. You're about to step onto the international stage. Are you ready? I looked him squarely in the eyes. I was born ready. They just never bothered to look. He grinned, pride flickering across his usually stern features. Let them keep looking past you, while you build an empire. And that's exactly what I did. By mid-October, the lodge was almost unrecognizable. The peeling paint was replaced with sleek cedar shingles. The warped porch was rebuilt wider and stronger. And the dusty old dining room, once a battleground of whispered insults and exclusion, was now an elegant event hall with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Sometimes I stood there late at night, barefoot on the polished wood floors, listening to the soft lapping of the water against the shore, remembering the girl who had once sat alone on these steps, invisible and unwanted, and the woman who now owned every stone, every beam, every memory. The final nail came on a Monday morning. I was presenting the final pitch for the Richardson deal to a room full of CEOs, CFOs, and skeptical board members. The air was thick with tension, the kind that could snap a lesser person in half. But not me. Not anymore. I laid out my strategy, my projections, my vision, clear, sharp, undeniable. I answered every challenge without blinking, dismantled every doubt with calm precision. When the chairman finally stood, extending his hand across the table, I knew it was done. The deal was ours. The room erupted in polite applause, but all I heard was the roaring in my ears. A decade of being overlooked, dismissed, minimized, ending here. Andrew clapped me on the shoulder as the executives filed out. "You realize," he said, "this cements it. London is yours if you want it." I nodded, barely able to contain the storm inside me. Not anger, not revenge, but a fierce, blazing certainty. I didn't just deserve a seat at the table. I had built the damn table. That evening, Piper dragged me to a small wine bar downtown to celebrate. "You," she announced dramatically as we clinked glasses, "are officially unstoppable." I laughed, genuinely for the first time in weeks. Feels strange. Strange good or strange terrifying. I thought about it. About the lodge, gleaming under the autumn stars. About the title deed tucked safely in my desk drawer. About the upcoming move to London. The blank canvas stretching out before me. Both, I admitted. Piper leaned in, her expression suddenly serious. "Just promise me one thing, Harper. Anything. Whatever happens when they find out, don't let them drag you back into their shadows." I smiled sadly, understanding all too well what she meant. "They won't," I promised. "They already lost me a long time ago." Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, for the first time in forever, I felt weightless. I was no longer the forgotten daughter waiting for a seat at the table. I was the storm they never saw coming. And my time was just beginning. The gravel driveway crunched under the weight of unfamiliar tires as I stood at the front window of Willow Lake Lodge, a mug of coffee warming my hands. I wasn't expecting them until tomorrow. But there they were, Jason's black SUV, Megan's minivan, and a cloud of dust announcing their chaotic arrival like a bad omen. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply watched as they piled out, laughing, shouting over one another, unloading bags and coolers like they still owned the place. Like nothing had changed. Jason popped the trunk and pulled out a set of golf clubs, Dad's old clubs, and slung them over his shoulder without a second thought. Megan corralled her twins, barking orders while balancing a tray of store-bought cookies. None of them looked at the house. None of them noticed the restored porch, the gleaming new windows, the discreet but expensive landscaping. They didn't see the sweat, the nights, the choices that had gone into rebuilding it. Why would they? They had never seen me either. I placed my mug down carefully, smoothed my blazer, and walked to the door. Opening it slowly, I leaned casually against the frame. "You're early," I said, voice calm, almost amused. Jason squinted up at me, confusion flickering across his face. "Harper?" Megan's jaw dropped. "What are you doing here?" I tilted my head. "Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing." Mom appeared from behind the van, dragging a battered suitcase. She froze when she saw me. For one exquisite moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Jason laughed awkwardly. "We're here for the reunion." "Trinity said she sent the invite weeks ago." "I know," I said simply. "I saw it." "And," Megan demanded, her voice sharper now, "are you visiting?" I smiled thinly. "No. I live here." Silence. Thick, heavy, charged. Jason blinked. "You live here?" I stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Come on in. Mi casa es su casa, literally." They shuffled past me like dazed tourists, craning their necks, taking in the gleaming floors, the renovated kitchen, the updated decor. Mom's fingers brushed the new banister, reverent, confused. This isn't how we left it. No, I agreed. It's better. Megan dropped her bags with a thud. But how? When? I closed the door with a soft click behind them. A few months ago. Bought it privately. Renovated it. Own outright. Jason set down the golf clubs a little too hard. You bought the lodge? I raised an eyebrow. Someone had to save it. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Harper, dear, why didn't you tell us? I sipped my coffee slowly. Would you have cared? Her face flushed crimson. The kids ran through the hallways, their laughter bouncing off the walls, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Megan glared at me, folding her arms. You didn't have to sneak around like this. We're family. I let out a soft laugh. Family, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. Funny, that word means so many different things to different people. Jason stepped forward, attempting a smile. Well, it's still the reunion weekend, right? We're all here. We can make it work. I set my coffee down deliberately on the entryway table. Oh, we'll have a reunion, I said, voice silk, wrapped around steel. But this year, it's going to look a little different. Mom's eyes narrowed. Different how? I smiled, slow and sharp. New house. New rules. They stared at me, uncertain, uneasy, realizing, too late, that the Harper they thought they knew no longer existed. The Harper who once begged for a seat at the table was gone. The Harper standing before them now owned the table, and the house around it. The dining room at Willow Lake Lodge looked almost ceremonial now, flooded with the golden glow of sunset pouring through the tall windows. The same dining room where I'd once sat invisible while laughter and conversation passed right over my head. Today, I sat at the head of the table. Jason, Megan, and Mom took their usual places like muscle memory, shuffling awkwardly, casting furtive glances at one another but saying nothing. The unspoken truth filled the air, thick and bitter. This was no longer their house. I cleared my throat gently, breaking the silence. So, about the reunion. Jason brightened, eager to smooth things over. Yeah, about that. We can still host it here, right? I mean, it's tradition. I leaned back in my chair, lacing my fingers together thoughtfully. Traditions are funny things, I mused aloud. They only matter when they serve the people clinging to them, not necessarily everyone involved. Megan stiffened. Harper, don't make this ugly. I smiled, slow and measured. I'm not making anything ugly, Megan. I'm just stating facts. Mom picked up her wine glass with trembling fingers. We all have history here, Harper. Memories. I set my gaze on her, unblinking. Do you remember my 12th birthday party? Mom blinked. Of course. We had cake by the lake. You had cake by the lake, I corrected softly. I spent the afternoon washing dishes because Jason broke a fishing rod and blamed it on me. Silence. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That was a long time ago. Was it? I asked, voice almost gentle, because funny enough, the pattern never changed. I rose from my seat, slowly, pacing the perimeter of the table. The polished floorboards clicked beneath my heels, punctuating every word. The college letters you never opened because you assumed I wouldn't get in. The scholarship offers you said weren't practical. The internships you dismissed as silly little jobs while Jason and Megan were praised for showing up to part-time retail work. Mom's face paled visibly. I stopped behind her chair, resting a hand lightly on the high back. You didn't forget me, Mom. You ignored me. There's a difference. Megan stood up suddenly, shoving her chair back. Fine. You want a medal for being successful now. Is that it? I tilted my head. No, I don't want your praise. I want you to recognize that I succeeded not because of you, but in spite of you. Jason opened his mouth, but Piper's timing was impeccable. She chose that moment to walk in carrying a small stack of glossy brochures. Sorry, she said with a faux cheerfulness, so biting it was practically a weapon. Just dropping off the event menus for the family reunion. She set the brochures on the table with a firm thud, scattering them like a deck of cards. Mom picked one up and gasped. The Four Seasons? Harper, this must have cost. Less than what I made last quarter, I interrupted calmly. Jason's eyes widened as he scanned the luxury details. Private ballroom, string quartet, custom menu. Why would you spend this much? Because, I said, walking slowly back to the head of the table this year, I wanted to make sure you remembered. Megan tossed the brochure down with a sneer. Remember what? Me, I said simply. The word hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. My phone buzzed softly on the table. A news alert. Without even picking it up, I knew what it was. The promotion had leaked early. The headlines would be everywhere by morning. Mom must have gotten the same alert because she fumbled for her phone, eyes wide as she read. Vice President of International Operations. She whispered, almost reverently. London headquarters. Overseeing mergers across 3 continents. Jason stared at me like I had grown a second head. You're moving? I met his gaze without flinching. Yes, next month. Megan sank heavily into her chair, deflated. Why didn't you tell us? I shrugged lightly. When exactly would you have listened? No one spoke. No one dared. For the first time in my life, their silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like victory. Not the flashy kind. Not the movie ending kind with applause and hugs. No, this was quieter, colder, infinitely sharper. They hadn't lost me because I got rich. They lost me because they never thought I was worth keeping in the first place. And now they finally realized it. The evening stretched thin like a frayed thread as we all sat in that too bright, too quiet dining room. Outside, the last streaks of sunset bled into a bruised purple sky, but inside time felt frozen, heavy with everything left unsaid. Mom set her phone down, her hands trembling slightly. Harper, we made mistakes, she said, voice wobbling between guilt and self-preservation. But you can't punish us forever. I tilted my head slightly. Punish you? I repeated, tasting the word like it was foreign. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just living my life. Jason leaned forward, his palms flat on the table. We get it now, okay? You're successful. You've proved your point. I studied him, wondering if he even realized how small his words made my journey sound. As if this was ever about proving a point to people who had decided long ago I wasn't worth noticing. No, I said quietly. You don't get it. You never did. Megan clutched her wine glass, so tightly I thought it might shatter. This isn't you, Harper. You're being vindictive. I smiled faintly, no humor in it. No, Megan. Vindictive would have been throwing you out the moment you pulled into the driveway. She flushed crimson, but said nothing. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Please, we can fix this. We can be a family again. The word family scraped against my skin, like sandpaper. Tell me something, I said, voice low. Would you be saying this if I was still living paycheck to paycheck in some studio apartment? If I wasn't worth a headline? No one answered. They didn't have to. The silence screamed louder than any apology could. I pushed back my chair and stood, the legs scraping sharply against the hardwood. This house, I said, sweeping my gaze around the room, used to be the center of my universe. I would have done anything, to feel like I belonged here. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. But you made sure I knew I didn't. Jason opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to apologize, but I shook my head. It's too late. Not because of the money. Not because of the title, but because you never wanted me. Only what I could do for you. The hurt flickered across their faces, raw and undeniable. Mom rose slowly, crossing the room to me. She reached out, her hand trembling as it touched my sleeve. Please, she whispered, don't leave angry. I looked down at her hand, small and desperate against the fabric of my blazer, and for a heartbeat I almost gave in. I almost pretended this moment could erase years of being invisible, but I didn't. I stepped back, gently but firmly breaking her grip. "I'm not angry," I said, surprising myself with the truth. "I'm just done." The finality of it cracked through the room like a thunderclap. I turned, walking to the door without looking back. Piper was already there, leaning casually against the frame, car keys dangling from her fingers. "You ready?" she asked softly. I nodded once. Behind me, Mom's voice broke. "When will we see you again?" I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. The temptation to offer hope, to leave a crack in the door, tugged at me, but I knew better now. "You won't," I said simply. And then I stepped into the cool night air, breathing in freedom so sharp it almost hurt. The lodge stood behind me, proud and glowing under the stars, but it wasn't my anchor anymore. It was just a house, a beautiful, bittersweet reminder that some chapters aren't meant to be revisited. Piper opened the passenger door for me with a wink. "Where to, boss?" I slid into the seat without hesitation. "Anywhere but here." As we pulled away, I watched the lights of Willow Lake Lodge disappear in the rearview mirror, smaller and smaller, until they were nothing but a distant memory. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from them. I was running toward myself. The flight to London wasn't for another week, but my life in Vermont already felt like it belonged to someone else, someone younger, more desperate for a place to belong. I spent my last days at the lodge not packing, but sorting. Old photographs, dusty trophies, forgotten birthday cards, all the relics of a childhood spent on the margins. Some I kept, most I left behind. On my final night, Piper sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, flipping through an old scrapbook. "You were always smiling in these," she said, frowning. Even when they weren't looking." I shrugged. I learned early that smiles were easier than explanations. She reached over, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to explain anything anymore." I smiled faintly, but inside a hollow ache throbbed. Letting go of a place was easy. Letting go of the girl who once clung to it with bleeding hands, that was harder. A knock interrupted the quiet. Standing in the doorway was Mom. No suitcases this time. No grand gestures. Just her, small and tired, clutching something wrapped in faded linen. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I nodded, too tired to fight the inevitable. She crossed the room slowly, setting the bundle on the bed between us. When I unwrapped it, my breath caught. It was the music box Dad had given me when I was 7, the one everyone else had forgotten I even owned. "I thought you might want it," Mom said, not meeting my eyes. I ran my fingers over the worn wood, the chipped paint, the tiny ballerina frozen mid-pirouette. So fragile, so breakable, so easily overlooked. "Thank you," I said quietly, setting it aside. Mom sat awkwardly on the edge of the bed, twisting her hands. "I know we were hard on you," she began, voice cracking. We didn't know how to handle you. You were always different. Different. Not difficult. Not wrong. Just different. And they hadn't known what to do with different, so they had pushed it into a corner and left it there to gather dust." I met her gaze squarely for the first time in years. I know. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. Some gaps can't be bridged with apologies offered too late. She rose slowly, as if weighted down by the enormity of everything left unsaid. At the door, she hesitated. "Take care of yourself, Harper." I nodded once. "You too." And then she was gone. Piper exhaled sharply, wiping at her eyes. "You okay?" I closed the music box, gently, tucking it into my carry-on. "I will be." The morning I left, the sky was a pale wash of blue, the lake a mirror reflecting nothing but empty space. Jason, Megan, even Mom had texted, last-minute promises of keeping in touch, invitations to future holidays. I deleted them all without reading. Promises made too late are just different versions of the same old silence. At the airport, Piper hugged me fiercely before stepping back, her eyes shining. "You know where to find me," she said. I smiled. Always. When my boarding group was called, I walked toward the gate without looking back. Not once. Above me, the loudspeakers crackled, announcing destinations far from Vermont, far from broken promises and half-healed scars. I wasn't escaping anymore. I wasn't chasing anything either. I was simply moving forward. As the plane lifted into the sky, I watched the ground fall away, the lake, the forests, the broken past shrinking into nothingness. Maybe one day I'd find a place that felt like home. Maybe not. Either way, I was done trying to earn it, because in the end, some battles aren't lost or won. Some battles just stop mattering, and that I realized was the real freedom.